I never thought letting a stranger use my shower would turn into the most unexpected chapter of my life. Honestly, I just wanted to be a decent guy for once, and somehow ended up with this whole new mess of feelings tangled up in the process. So, here's the deal. I live alone in a tiny apartment in the city, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm the kind of guy who keeps to himself mostly, pretty introverted, and honestly not great at putting myself out there. My job's decent, my routine predictable. Wake up, work, home, sleep, repeat. Social life barely exists outside of a few close friends. I guess you could say I'm pretty comfortable in my little bubble, no dramas, no surprises. At least, that's what I thought. Then, one rainy Tuesday, everything flipped. I was just getting home after a long day at work, soaked from the sudden downpour, when I saw this guy standing awkwardly outside the building's entrance, looking like he'd been caught in a storm way worse than the one I'd just survived. He was drenched head to toe, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket dripping water everywhere. I almost walked past him, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the way he looked utterly stranded, or maybe I just felt like breaking my own routine for once. So I asked if he was okay. He said his place was a block away, but the rain had turned into a relentless torrent, and he didn't have a towel or a change of clothes. His name was Liam. Without thinking much, I offered, "Hey, you want to come up and use my shower? It's warm and dry, and I've got towels." He looked at me like I was some kind of guardian angel for a second, then hesitated. I get it. Inviting a stranger up to your place isn't exactly everyday stuff. But after a beat, he smiled, a little shy, a little relieved, and said, "Yeah, sure, thanks." Now, I don't know if it was the way he said thanks or the way his eyes lit up when he smiled, but something about Liam stuck with me. I watched him disappear into my bathroom, the sound of running water filling the apartment, and I found myself weirdly nervous, like some kind of anticipation I hadn't felt in a long time. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down on my couch, trying to play it cool, but my mind was running circles. Who was this guy? Why did I feel this sudden pull toward him? And, most importantly, what was I going to do when he stepped out of that shower? When the water finally stopped, I heard the door open just a crack. Liam peeked out, wrapped in one of my towels, hair still wet, and for a moment there was this silence, like the air between us thickened all at once. He said, "I don't want to overstay, but I don't really want to go back out in the rain just yet." I shrugged, trying to seem casual, but failing miserably. "Well, there's dry clothes in the closet if you want. Or you can just hang out here for a bit." And that's when things got interesting. Because he didn't just come out of the bathroom, grab his clothes, and leave. He sat down, he talked. We ended up sharing more than just my couch and a beer that night. Somehow, that one simple act of kindness turned into something I never saw coming. I had no idea that letting him shower at my place would be the night everything changed, and that he would never actually leave. He settled onto my couch like he belonged there, towel still wrapped around him, droplets of water making little puddles on the cushions. I was trying hard not to stare, because Liam was surprisingly easy on the eyes, not in this flashy, obvious way, but in a kind of quiet, genuine way. Like someone who wasn't trying, but still looked like he belonged in the middle of your life. So I began, awkwardly holding my beer. "What exactly were you doing out in this mess without a coat or an umbrella?" He laughed softly, shaking water off his hair. "Story of my life, I guess. I'm a bit scatterbrained sometimes. Left my umbrella at a cafe, missed my bus, and then the rain decided to show no mercy." I nodded, feeling that. My own clumsiness had gotten me into plenty of scrapes. Fair enough. Name's Matt, by the way. I held out a hand. "Liam," he said, shaking it firmly, eyes locking with mine for just a second longer than usual. That weird little spark hit me again, and I had to look away. It was ridiculous. Why was I suddenly nervous about a guy the first just met? We fell into an easy conversation after that, talking about work. He worked at a bookstore just a few blocks away, and shared some stories about the city, favorite coffee shops, and the one time he accidentally locked himself out of his apartment. Nothing deep, nothing heavy, but there was an undercurrent of something, hopeful. At some point, I noticed he was still in that towel, and I realized he probably didn't have a change of clothes. I felt a little bad about that, Look, if you want, you can just keep some stuff here, you know? Change whenever you need, I said offhandedly. But inside I was thinking, damn, why did I even say that? What am I? A halfway house for lost, wet strangers. He gave me this grateful smile that felt like sunshine after a week of rain. Thanks, Matt. That means a lot. That night, Liam crashed on my couch. I wasn't sure if I should have offered, to be honest, but he looked exhausted, and honestly, I couldn't argue with the idea of having him around. I figured he'd probably leave in the morning, grab his stuff, and disappear like a fleeting daydream. But the next day, he was still there, and the day after that. Somehow, his visits became regular. He'd swing by after work, stay for dinner, or sometimes just hang out and watch TV, and I was okay with that. More than okay, even. I started to notice little things. The way he'd laugh at dumb jokes I didn't think were funny, how he made my tiny apartment feel less empty, how his presence turned the silence into something comforting. One evening, we cooked dinner together, pasta and a ridiculously simple tomato sauce because that's all I knew how to make. Liam was better at chopping, and I was better at burning things, so it balanced out. We bickered about who was the better cook, and by the time we sat down to eat, I was grinning like a fool. So he said between bites, "Do you ever regret inviting a random stranger in to use your shower?" I laughed. Honestly, for a second, I thought I was about to be robbed or something. He smiled, shaking his head. "You're braver than you think, Matt. Or maybe just stupid," I replied. But the warmth in my chest told me it was something else. As days turned into weeks, Liam became my unexpected constant. We fell into a rhythm I hadn't realized I was missing. Morning coffees, lazy Sundays, shared playlists blasting through my tiny speakers. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was part of my world. There was a moment, about a week after he'd moved in, when I caught myself watching him while he was reading on the couch, sunlight catching the soft curve of his jaw, and I realized I was thinking about him like more than just a friend. I quickly pushed the thought away, trying to ignore the sudden tightness in my chest. Was I really falling for the guy the first let shower in my apartment during a rainstorm? One night we were sitting close on the couch, shoulders touching, neither of us saying much. The quiet was comfortable, familiar, and then Liam broke it. "Do you ever wonder how something so random can turn into this?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the same question mirrored in his eyes. I shrugged, a little nervous. "I guess sometimes the best things come from the weirdest moments." He smiled, a little shy, and shifted closer. "Yeah. I'm glad I crashed your storm, Matt." And just like that, the air changed between us. Something shifted. I didn't know where it was going, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay not knowing. Because sometimes, the best stories start with a simple, unexpected act of kindness, and a stranger who never leaves. That night, after Liam moved just a little closer on the couch, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was uncomfortable or anything, but because my mind was working overtime trying to figure out what the hell was happening between us. It was like all these little moments, sharing a blanket, trading jokes, the way his hand brushed mine, had built this invisible thread connecting us tighter each day. I kept tossing and turning, wondering if I was crazy for feeling this way about a guy who just sort of appeared out of nowhere and never left. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the soft hum of music coming from the living room. Liam was already up, sitting at my small kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. The sun was spilling through the window behind him, casting an early glow across his face, and for a moment I just watched him, feeling this strange mix of calm and excitement. "Morning," he said, looking up and smiling that easy, genuine smile that somehow made everything feel okay. "Morning," I replied, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. "Coffee?" He nodded, standing up and stretching. "Yeah, and maybe some breakfast? I can whip something up if you want." I hesitated for a second. There was a part of me that wanted to say no, to keep things casual and uncomplicated, but that wasn't how this was going anymore. "Sure, I'm starving." In the tiny kitchen, Liam moved around like he belonged there, chopping, stirring, humming along to the music. I watched him. feeling that familiar warmth spreading in my chest. It was dumb, but it felt like home. Over breakfast, we talked about everything and nothing. Plans for the weekend, favorite movies, old embarrassing stories. Somehow, the conversation felt effortless, like we'd known each other for years, not just a few weeks. Later that day, we went for a walk in the park nearby. The rain had finally stopped, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Liam held my hand, a little shyly at first, like he wasn't sure if I'd pull away. But I didn't. I squeezed his fingers gently, letting him know I was here, that this was real. We found a quiet bench under a big oak tree and sat down, watching people pass by. Liam leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "I don't want to rush things," he said quietly, "but I'm really glad I met you, Matt. I wasn't expecting this, any of it. Neither was I admitted. But maybe the best things happen when you least expect them." He smiled, those eyes sparkling. "Yeah, like a random shower invitation turning into this." I laughed softly, then got serious. "Liam, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you staying? Like, really staying?" He looked down at our joined hands and then back up at me. "I don't want to go anywhere. Not if you don't want me to." That hit me harder than I expected. I realized then I didn't want him to leave either. Not at all. Back at my apartment, things started to feel different. Liam's presence was no longer a surprise or a novelty. It was part of the rhythm of my days. We cooked dinner together more often, traded playlists, and shared stories about our pasts. I learned that he'd moved here a year ago for a fresh start, but hadn't found his footing yet. And I told him about my own struggles with feeling stuck in my routine, too afraid to reach out and break the walls I'd built around myself. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I found him waiting for me on the couch, a bottle of wine open and 2 glasses ready. He smiled when I walked in, and I felt this rush of gratitude. "Long day?" he asked, patting the seat next to him. "The longest," I groaned, flopping down beside him. He handed me a glass, and we sipped quietly for a moment. Then, like it had been building all night, he reached out and took my hand. "Matt," he said softly, "I think I'm falling for you." I blinked, heart pounding. "Liam." I was just about to say the same thing. His grin was all the answer I needed. We leaned into each other, that long-awaited kiss sealing the promise that neither of us was going anywhere. That's when I realized letting him shower that night wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the start of something I never even dared hope for, a real connection with someone who saw me and stayed. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. After that night, things between Liam and me started feeling different, like we'd crossed some invisible line. But instead of making things weird or awkward, it only made everything feel more real. We weren't just roommates or friends hanging out. There was this unspoken us now, and I was surprisingly okay with it. The morning after we admitted how we felt, I woke up to Liam's soft breathing next to me on the couch. I'd fallen asleep watching some dumb movie, and he'd covered me with a blanket. Something about that simple gesture hit me hard. Like, here was this guy who just showed up in my life, and now he was looking out for me, without me asking. It felt safe, and maybe even a little bit like love. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen to make coffee, thinking about how much I wanted to tell him that I wasn't scared anymore. Not of letting someone in, not of anything really. Later that day, we went to that bookstore where Liam worked. It was this cozy little place tucked away between a bakery and a vintage record shop. The kind of spot you'd only find if you were looking for it, which felt fitting because that's exactly how I felt about Liam, like a hidden gem I'd stumbled on when I least expected it. He showed me around, pointing out his favorite authors, telling me stories about odd customers and funny book signings. I was honestly impressed by how passionate he was, and I found myself wanting to know everything about him, even the little things he thought didn't matter. We ended up grabbing coffee at the bakery next door, sitting by the window, watching people go by. Liam's hand found mine under the table, warm and steady, and I didn't pull away. Somehow, holding his hand felt like the most natural thing in the world. On the walk back to my apartment, the city was buzzing with that late afternoon energy, the hum of traffic, distant sirens, people chatting on sidewalks. Liam squeezed my hand and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find someone like you here." I laughed, a little nervous. "You're full of surprises, Liam." He shrugged, grinning. "I guess that's what happens when you let strangers shower in your place." I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling too. "Yeah, well, don't get used to me being that generous." That evening, something shifted again. We were sitting on the couch, the usual soundtrack of low-key music playing in the background, when Liam turned to me and said, "Can I be honest about something?" "Always," I replied. He took a deep breath. "I was scared when I first came here. Not just because of the rain, but because I'd been alone for so long. I wasn't sure if I could trust someone, or if anyone would want to stick around, you know?" I nodded, feeling my chest tighten. "Yeah, I get that. I've been there too. Keeping people at arm's length because it's easier." Liam smiled softly. "But you made me feel like maybe I didn't have to be scared anymore." I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You don't have to be." And in that quiet moment, I realized just how much I wanted to be the one he could trust, the one who stayed. Days turned into weeks, and the small routines we built started to feel like the best parts of my life. We cooked together, argued playfully over what movie to watch, shared our favorite songs, and even started planning little weekend trips. Just small adventures, but adventures nonetheless. One night, after a late shift at the bookstore, Liam showed up at my door with a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked from a park nearby. It was unexpected and sweet, and I felt this surge of happiness that caught me off guard. "Thought you might like these," he said, cheeks flushed and eyes sparkling. I laughed, taking the flowers and pulling him in for a quick kiss. "You're impossible to resist," he grinned. "Good, but life wasn't all easy and perfect, of course." There were moments when my insecurities crept in, when I worried if he'd get tired of me, if this was all too fast or too much. Liam seemed to sense it sometimes, wrapping me in a hug when I least expected it and reminding me that he was here for real. One evening, after a rough day at work where everything felt overwhelming, I found myself on the verge of shutting down. Liam just sat beside me quietly, not pushing, not asking, just being there. Eventually, I opened up. About my fears, about feeling stuck in a loop, about how meeting him had been the only bright thing in months. He listened, really listened, and then said, "Matt, you're not alone anymore. We're in this together." That simple statement broke down a wall I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I leaned into him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe things were going to be okay. Sometimes I still catch myself thinking about how weirdly lucky I am. A stranger shows up in the rain, I offer a shower, and suddenly my whole world changes. It's crazy how life works out like that. Now Liam isn't just the guy who never left. He's the guy the first want to stay with. The guy the first want to build a life with, messy and unpredictable as it may be. And honestly, I can't wait to see what comes next. It's funny how the smallest gestures can mean the most. Like Liam bringing those wildflowers, or the way he'd casually lean against me in the kitchen while we cooked, making me feel less like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. I was learning that love wasn't some grand, sweeping gesture or perfect movie moment. It was the quiet, everyday stuff. The shared cups of coffee, the late-night talks, the comfortable silences. One Saturday, we decided to spend the day just wandering around the city. Neither of us had much planned, which felt freeing. We started with breakfast at this little hole-in-the-wall diner Liam swore had the best pancakes, then just drifted through streets, stopping at bookstores, odd vintage shops, and a small park where we sat on a bench and people watched. At one point, Liam tugged me toward this tiny art gallery tucked between two cafes. Inside was a collection of local artists, work, paintings, photographs, sculptures. I'm not usually the artsy type, but something about the place felt intimate, like a secret we were sharing. We stopped in front of a painting of a stormy sea, waves crashing violently against jagged rocks. Liam looked at me, eyes serious for once. "You know," he said softly, "that storm is kind of like how I felt before I met you. Everything was crashing around me, and I thought I was stuck on those rocks. I reached out and took his hand, but you found your way to shore." He smiled, but there was a flicker of something vulnerable there. "Yeah, with you. We left the gallery hand in hand, but the moment stayed with me all day. The idea that we'd both been weathering storms and somehow found each other in the chaos. Back at my apartment that evening, we cooked dinner together again, the kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of garlic and basil. I caught Liam watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, this soft, tender expression that made my heart race. After dinner, we sprawled on the couch, the city lights flickering through the window. Liam rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt this overwhelming sense of belonging. "Matt," he said after a while, voice barely above a whisper, "I don't want to pretend anymore. I want everyone to know you're mine." I turned to him, surprised but thrilled. "Are you serious?" He nodded, eyes shining. "Yeah. I want to stop hiding. Stop feeling like this is some secret thing. I want us to be out there, together." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd never been great with the idea of opening up like that. Letting people see me, really see me. But with Liam, it felt different. "Safe. I want that too," I admitted, fingers tracing lazy patterns on his arm. "I'm scared, but I want it." He smiled, leaning in to kiss me gently. "We'll figure it out together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of firsts, introducing Liam to my closest friends, coming out to some of my family, and even going to a pride event for the first time. It wasn't always easy. Some people were supportive, others less so. But through it all, Liam was my rock, and I was his. There was this one night I'll never forget. We'd been out late, dancing and laughing, and on the walk home, the city quiet except for our footsteps, Liam stopped me. "Matt," he said, eyes serious, "I know this has been a big change for both of us, but I want you to know something." I looked at him, heart pounding. "I love you, not just because you let me shower that night, but because you're you, flaws and all. And I'm not going anywhere." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I love you too, Liam, more than I thought I could." We stood there under a street lamp, wrapped in each other's arms, the world around us fading away. Life with Liam isn't perfect. We have our fights, our misunderstandings, moments when the past creeps back in. But every day, I'm grateful I said yes to that random shower invitation, because it brought me the most unexpected, beautiful thing, a chance at love when I thought all I had was routine. I still remember the first night he showered in my apartment, dripping rainwater and all, and how that simple kindness turned into this incredible journey. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. After that night beneath the street lamp, something shifted in the way I saw us, not just as two people who happened to be together, but as partners genuinely building something real. It wasn't always fireworks or grand gestures. Most days, it was the quiet moments. The way Liam would curl up next to me on the couch after a long day, or how he made my terrible coffee in the mornings, just because he knew I liked it that way. One evening, a few weeks later, Liam and I decided to try making dinner from scratch. We'd been living together long enough that the initial excitement of "let's cook together" had settled into a comfortable routine. But that night, there was something different. Maybe it was the way Liam laughed as I clumsily chopped garlic, or the way his eyes lit up when the sauce started to simmer. Whatever it was, I felt myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in years. "You know," he said while stirring the pot, "I never thought I'd have someone to cook with." "Especially not you," I smirked, tossing some herbs into the sauce. "Hey, don't sell yourself short. You're the one who talked me into trying to make this thing." He grinned. "Fair." We sat down at the tiny table by the window, sharing the meal, talking about everything from childhood memories to impossible dreams. At one point, Liam reached across the table and grabbed my hand, his thumb tracing circles on the back of it. "Matt," he said quietly, "do you ever think about the future? Like, where this might go?" I swallowed, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. "Yeah." I try not to get ahead of myself, but yeah, I think about it. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "Because I wanna be part of your future, not just now, but long term." It was the kind of moment you hope for but don't expect to happen so soon, and yet there it was, real and raw between us. I want that too, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Over the next few months, the idea of us grew stronger. We started talking about moving to a bigger place, something with a bit more room for the both of us, and maybe even a little space for a dog. The thought of building a life together wasn't scary anymore. It was exciting. One lazy Sunday afternoon, we were sprawled on the couch, flipping through apartment listings online. Liam stopped scrolling and looked at me, that mischievous smile playing on his lips. "What if we found a place with a bathtub?" he said, teasing. I laughed. "I swear, you're obsessed with baths." "Hey, they're the best for unwinding," he shot back, wiggling his eyebrows. I looked at him then, really looked, at his messy hair, the way his eyes sparkled when he smiled, the warmth that radiated from him, even on the coldest days. "Promise me something?" "Anything. Promise me you'll stay, no matter what." He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my neck. "I promise." As the weeks turned to seasons, we settled into a groove. Work days, weekends, dinners, lazy mornings. But life wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when old insecurities bubbled up, when I wondered if I was good enough or if Liam might get tired of me. Sometimes, those doubts crept into my head like unwelcome guests. One night, after a particularly stressful day, I found myself snapping at Liam over something small and stupid. Immediately, I regretted it. He looked hurt, and I hated myself for it. "I'm sorry," I said, grabbing his hand gently. "I didn't mean that." He sighed but smiled softly. "It's okay, Matt. We all have bad days." We spent the rest of the evening talking through not just that argument, but the fears underneath it. The fear of losing what we'd built, the fear of being vulnerable. "I guess that's the thing about real relationships," Liam said. "It's not about being perfect. It's about sticking around even when things get messy." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "Yeah, I'm glad we're in this mess together." One chilly morning, Liam surprised me with breakfast in bed, pancakes stacked high, fresh fruit, and a note that made me laugh out loud. "From your favorite clumsy cook," it read. I looked up at him, eyes shining. "How did you know pancakes were my favorite?" He shrugged, grinning. Lucky guess. In that moment, wrapped in the warmth of his smile and the soft glow of the morning sun, I realized I wasn't just letting Liam be in my life anymore. I was choosing him. Every day. We started making plans for a trip, a weekend getaway to the coast to celebrate our anniversary. Neither of us had ever been good at vacations, always caught up in work or life's demands, but this felt different. We needed it. The night before we left, we lay tangled together on the couch, talking quietly about our hopes for the trip. "Promise me one more thing?" I whispered. Liam looked at me, eyes full of curiosity. "No matter what happens out there, we stick together. We don't let go." He smiled, brushing a kiss across my forehead. "I promise." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, a deep sense of peace, knowing that whatever storms life threw at us, we'd face them side by side. And honestly, after all this time, that's more than I ever thought I deserved. The weekend by the coast turned out to be exactly what we needed, and more. We stayed in this little cabin overlooking the water, with windows that caught the sunrise just right, and a porch swing that creaked gently in the salty breeze. It was quiet, simple, no distractions except the sound of waves and the comfort of each other. One morning, we sat outside wrapped in blankets, sipping coffee and watching the horizon turn from slate gray to soft pink. Liam reached over and squeezed my hand, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You ever think about how crazy it is? How one rainy night and a simple offer to use a shower turned into all of this?" I chuckled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I think about it all the time. I never imagined I'd find someone like you, someone I actually want to come home to every day." He looked at me then, eyes full of warmth and something deeper, something that made my heart feel like it might burst quietly, beautifully. "Me too," he said. "You're not just my home, Matt. You're my person." It wasn't a grand declaration, no fireworks or dramatic music swelling in the background. Just two people sitting together, knowing in their bones that what they had was real and rare. That trip, those quiet mornings and long walks, made me realize how far I'd come, from the guy who kept his distance, afraid to let anyone in, to someone who could finally say, with certainty, that he was loved and loving in return. When we got back to the city, the rhythm of everyday life resumed, but something had shifted irrevocably. Our apartment felt fuller, warmer. Even the smallest things, Liam leaving a note on the fridge, the way he'd sing off-key while cooking, the way we'd share silly jokes no one else understood, were threads weaving us closer together. I remember one night, just weeks after we returned, we were lying on the couch, tangled up in each other's arms, when I said, I don't think I'll ever regret letting you use my shower that night. He laughed softly. I was kind of hoping you wouldn't, because I'm not going anywhere. And with that simple promise, everything felt right. The fears, the doubts, the past, all of it faded into the background, replaced by this quiet certainty that we were building something worth holding on to. I never thought a random act of kindness could change the course of my life, but it did. Liam became more than a stranger who showed up in the rain. He became my best friend, my partner, the person I want beside me for all the ordinary and extraordinary moments ahead. Sometimes life surprises you in the best ways when you least expect it. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that letting someone in, that small, brave choice, can lead to the most beautiful, unexpected love. So yeah, I let him shower at my place. And he never left. And honestly, I'm glad he didn't.